and happy Mother's Day. I'm going to share a very deep level about the principle of motherhood today. It is based on the teachings of truth. It will be in part like a history lesson, so stay awake. I will be sharing with you different legends about the image of the mother and women as seen throughout the history of humanity from the teachings of Joseph Campbell, Helena Rourke, Agni Yoga, and from Torquem Sardarian. In the book Illumination, it reads, "I have already told you that the mother of the world conceals her name. I have already shown you how the mother of the world veils her face. I have already made mention about the mother of Buddha and Christ. Indeed, it is time to point out that the one mother of both lords is not a symbol, but a great manifestation of the feminine origin, in which is revealed the spiritual mother of Christ and Buddha. She it was who taught and ordained them for achievement. From times immemorial, the mother of the world has sent forth to achievement. In the history of humanity, her hand traces an unbreakable thread. On Sinai, her voice rang out. She assumed the image of Kali. She was the basis of the worship of Isis and Ishtar. After Atlantis, when a blow was inflicted upon the worship of the spirit, the mother of the world began to weave a new thread, which will now begin to radiate. After the mother of the world veiled her face and forbade the pronouncement of her name until the hour of the constellation should strike." And again, this is a quote from the book Illumination, paragraph 11. Torquem Sardarian, he wrote this. "A legend says that about 5,000 years ago, the world mother gathered around her all advanced women in the world. These women were at least third-degree initiates, which means they had achieved total purity and transformation in their lives. The world mother collected these women around her and created a many-petaled flower in which the women formed the petals, and she stood at the core. A beautiful lotus of many petals now stands in space, from which the petals, age after age, incarnate and later give birth to all heroes, world leaders, and great ones. This organized group in its totality is called the World Mother. But at the same time, this is so cool, listen to this. But at the same time, each of the petals is called the Mother of the World, because each petal represents the totality of the World Mother. This is a phenomenon similar to what we find in a flower, where each petal takes energy and inspiration and impression and life current from the core of the flower, but each petal also represents the flower. Helena Rourke wrote, "In the epoch of the Mother of the World, we must welcome every mention of her. In the East, the worshippers of the Mother of the World, Goddess Kali, is widespread. The one might say it is predominant in Hinduism. But even among other factions, one finds more worshippers of the Great Mother than any other aspect of divinity. In Mongolia and Tibet, the white Tara and other Taras are greatly worshipped. In the most ancient religions, the feminine deities were considered the most sacred. In 1924, the rays of the luminary of the Mother of the World reached Earth. 1924. And in pouring upon it, they awakened a new consciousness. The hearts of many women were kindled with aspiration toward new life. Helen O'Rourke continued in her writings to her students, saying that, according to the sacred teaching, the fall of humanity began from the time of feminine principle. Therefore, with the beginning of the epoch of the Mother of the World, woman should realize that she herself contains all forces, and the moment she shakes off the age-old hypnosis of her seemingly lawful subjugation and mental inferiority, and occupies herself with a manifold education, she will create, in collaboration with man, a new and better world. And she said, the manifestation of the Mother of the World will create unity. The task now is to create a spiritually sovereign position for the woman. And the transmission to woman of direct communion with the highest forces is necessary as a psychological impetus. Of course, through the new religion will come the necessary respect. The teachings explained that the new religion will give many beautiful examples of women who have achieved much for humanity with their beauty and with their simplicity. It will be shown that the mother of Christ and the mother of Buddha were the same. Master M says, she is the mother of the world. She is not a symbol, but a manifestation of great feminine achievement. Joseph Campbell wrote, in one of the earliest moments of Buddhist art, it is the dream of the Buddha's mother, Queen Maya, the night before she conceived the Savior. She thought she saw descending through her sleep from the heaven of the highest gods, where the reincarnating monad of the one now to become the Buddha had been dwelling between incarnations. The form of a glorious white elephant, radiant with 4 brilliant tusks, while on reaching the earth walked thrice around her bed in the auspicious sunrise direction, struck her right side with its trunk and entered the womb. He goes on to write, Joseph Campbell goes on to write, according to the earliest known version of the Buddhist nativity legend, the young Queen Maya, having carried the world's Savior in her womb for exactly 10 lunar months, and desiring to give birth to her child in her mother's home, was being transported in a golden palanquin by her company of attendants along a road beautified for the journey with banners, streamers, trees set out in pots. And when they came to a glorious garden of trees that was at that moment in bloom, there were among its fragrant boughs humming swarms of bees of the 5 colors, flocks of birds of various feathers, and the young queen, wishing to pause in that delightful spot, descended from her palanquin and entered the grove, surrounded by her company. Whereupon, at the foot of a giant tree, the pains of her time overtook her. And when she reached upward with her right hand, a flowery bough of that tree bent down, like the top or the tip of a well-steamed reed, and grasping it, the young queen, standing, gave birth to her child, who came forth from her right side. 4 pure-minded Mahabrahma great ones, who had instantly descended, received the infant on a golden net and placed him before his mother, giving praise. "Rejoice, O queen," they said, "there has been born to you a mighty son." From the sky 2 pure streams of water fell, refreshing the child and its mother. After which the infant, standing upright, facing east, strode forward 7 steps, pointed upward with his right hand, downward with his left, and shouted with a noble voice the victory shout of all the Buddhas: "Worlds above, worlds below, the chief in all the worlds am I." Why the name Queen Maya? The cosmic feminine principle, also called Maya, is this: a veiling power that hides or conceals the real, the inward, essential character of things, so that, as we read in a sacred Sanskrit text, though it is hidden in all things, the self shines not forth. And what about Mary? Torquem Serdarian wrote, Mary lived in the Temple of Jerusalem up to her 14th year. She lived the purest life possible for a child, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Her physical environment was beautiful, with trees and flowers and architectural masterpieces surrounding her. Mary was so pure that she was able to be in continuous communication with the angelic kingdom. She passed through disciplines of fasting, of emotional and mental control, in long years of silence, loneliness, and prayer. Mary had passed many years of extreme discipline, meditation, and worship, preparing herself for a greater one to dwell within her and to play a greater role in the greater drama of revelation. Mary told Joseph, when in great surprise saw she was with child, "I was at the fountain to fill my pitcher when a glorious angel stood at my side and said, 'Mary, peace be with you. Behold, a light from heaven will come and dwell in you. The power of the highest will overshadow you, and you, a virgin, will conceive and bear a son.'" On the way to Bethlehem, Mary's time for deliverance of her child was at hand. They hastened to find a place to rest. At a shepherd's home, Joseph explained the situation, and the shepherd led them to a cave-like room where some sheep were housed. Mary gave birth to her child. The baby stretched out his little hand, and on the palm was a red sign, a star. Upon this sign we, the Magi, placed the most precious pearl of those that we brought. In a story given by Master Moria, he tells us it was the command of the Brotherhood to hail Jesus, to safeguard and bring some means to the poor family, to help them spiritually and financially. Hal Ballios, author of the book Three Remarkable Women, wrote, "These are teachings that have been given by women, women who have carefully and deliberately kept their identities secret, or at least their personalities hidden as much as possible as they presented their ideas." Helena Rourke, the mother of Agni Yoga, the teaching of living ethics, was one of those women. Helena chose to remain in this tradition as much as possible while she presented her philosophy to the world. She preferred, like many others before her, to let the teaching speak for itself, while she kept her personality in the background. Yet, inspired by Master Moria, who is also Helena Blavatsky's master, Helena Rourke brought us the teaching of Agni Yoga, the highest known form of yoga. MM in the book Illumination instructed that the lofty mission of women must be performed by the woman, and in the temple of the Mother of the world should abide the woman. And MM instructed that, quote, "Indeed, councils of ministers will have to include women. Woman who gives life to people must also have a voice in the making of its destiny. Women must have the right voice. If women were accepted as was ordained, the world would be quite differently impregnated." So the age of women refers to leadership by the feminine principle. The principle of love, compassion, and intuition. The teaching tells us that the second solar system, our present solar system, is feminine. That the feminine principle is the dominating factor. That women will dominate as agents of greater wisdom. The new religion will bring to women the respect necessary to make the feminine principle influential. Much of what I've shared with you today has been from the writings of Helena Rourke and Agni Yoga. Helena Rourke was one whom we are told revealed unusual qualities even in childhood, where she was seen secretly carrying away a heavy volume of Doré's Bible. Bending from its burdensome weight, hiding it from the grown-ups, she had taken the treasure in order to study the illustrations. And eventually, when she taught herself to read, to study the Testaments. Helena Rourke was born in Russia on February 12, 1879, and died October 5, 1955. As a child, she was very sensitive and frequently ailing. During illnesses, two very tall men would appear to her with help, but when the grown-ups objected to her accounts of them, she learned to keep her thoughts to herself. A few years ago, I called the Agni Yoga Society and talked to Daniel Enton, asking him to give me more information about Madame Rourke. He shared a great deal with me at that time about her life, and some of which I'm going to share with you today. Daniel said, Helena Rourke was a great woman. She was deeply dedicated to the upliftment of the human consciousness. Her balance in life was reflected through her marriage, 2 children, maintaining a household, and serving thousands as a spiritual leader. She had a great interest in women and supported the feminist point of view. He explained that she demonstrated humility by not wanting those who studied the teaching to focus on her personal nature, and as such strictly forbade others to portray her picture and details about her personal life, especially in this country. Of course, there are people such as her niece, who lives in Russia, who through their memories can share those memories about her. Helena Rourke, as a great teacher, was in contact with thousands of people. Imagine, before the internet, was in contact with thousands of people. She corresponded with hundreds as her students. Some of the correspondence is found in the 2-volume series, Letters of Helena Rourke. As a mother of 2 boys, she raised them with the same care she nurtured her students. Her 2 boys reflected the beauty of their mother through their lives and talents. As visitors would enter the Rourke home, Helena would care for them, making certain their rooms were properly prepared. And when the guests were ready for departure, she would provide food for their journey. Many hours were spent running the house so everyone was taken care of and fed, and the servants helped with the mechanics of their daily life. Of her interest in women, one of her concerns was with the founding of organizations for women around the world. And though her time did not open the way for this realization, Daniel says, I do believe her teachings planted seeds in the minds of women to progress toward the reality given to them of her wisdom and knowledge. He said, while she supported the feminist point of view, not all was of her liking. And even now, Daniel felt she would continue to support the feminist point of view. Helena spent many hours in her room writing and typing manuscripts. Nicholas Rourke, her husband and one of the finest painters of his day, with an unparalleled command of color, was also very spiritually advanced. Professor Nicholas would, from another place in their home, listen to Helena and the clacking of the keys on the typewriter. Because of her many ailments, when the typewriter would become silent, he would quiet himself in concern, waiting to hear the activity coming again from the typewriter, knowing then she was all right and ready to assume or resume her work. And just as a side note, in one of Helena's letters to Sina Fosdick became the executive director, the first executive director of the Nicholas Rourke Museum and Agni Yoga Society. So in one of Helena's letters to Husina Fosdick, she made a comment, now George needs my typewriter. George is their son. In the book Aum, verse 416, it instructs that women herself must set an example in unity. By their own hands, women of all races and beliefs will help to mold the steps of evolution. There should be no delay. And now let me close with the words of Helena Rourke, the mother of Agni Yoga. She wrote, "Ancient legends actually attribute to woman the role of the guardian of sacred knowledge. Therefore, may she now also remember her defamed ancestor, Eve, and again hearken to the voice of her intuition, in not only eating of, but also planting as many trees, bearing the fruits of the knowledge of good and evil, all possible." She wrote, "Let us develop primarily our sense of our own dignity and learn courageously on our own strength and knowledge in order to join in as well as accept responsibility for the great structure of the general good." There exists a most ancient saying, "Where women are revered and safeguarded, where women are revered and safeguarded, prosperity reigns and the gods rejoice." So this is kind of a condensed lecture today, but I feel it is so powerful. I gave this talk a few years ago. You may have recognized it, but it deserves repeating. You know, I was thinking as I was putting this together how when I lived in Florida, in Sarasota, and was an ordained minister, well, I still am, but it was really new and fresh back in the day. It took me 7 years to go through the different programs to be ordained. And I decided in my zest for that position that I wanted to join the local association of ministers. And so I did. I made an application and they accepted me. And we would meet once a month. The first meeting that I attended, I was the only woman there of some 45 or 50 men, all representing, the pastors of their churches. So as I was introduced, they thought that I was an associate pastor or that I was in a supporting position in some way of my church. It was very interesting. And then when I told them no, I was the pastor of the White Mountain Educational Center, then the challenges began. And every meeting they would put me in a challenging position as a woman. And they would oftentimes have speakers. So they'd have a speaker, and then we'd have lunch and then a conversation. Never did they have a woman representing the ministry. It was always a man who was the pastor. And they would talk about the pastor and his wife. So one day I, stood up in my naive young life and I said, "Why do you not think about a pastor having a husband?" And you could have, you can imagine the shock. It was so funny, I could not help but laugh. But they began to change. And it wasn't too much longer, maybe a year or two after that, another woman came that was a pastor of another church. Of course, what made it difficult for me is I was not only a pastor of a church, it was not a Christian church. And so some of those challenges was, well, tell us about your faith. And what corner is your church? Well, we didn't have a corner. We met halfway down the street at the Oddfellows Hall. So I think I was a thorn in their side for a long time. It was so very interesting. It was so male dominated. And then they began to turn around. It's like their consciousness began to change just a little bit more, a little bit more. And then another story I like to share, just in reflection about how women must respect women and the power they as a woman have, and not to look at the masculine energy as the more powerful. There is a dual origin here of man and woman. We can't have one without the other. The feminine energy and the masculine energy both must work together. Anyway, so this story, this is back in Florida days again. I had been asked to officiate at a very large wedding, and I brought a friend with me from White Mountain to help me and support. And when we got there, I was introduced to a lot of people, and there were several ministers that were men that were there. And when I was introduced to them as the officiating pastor, they were angry. What are you doing here? Why are you officiating? Why were you the one that was asked? Because these were prominent. It was a prominent couple that I was marrying. And I said, because that's just the way it is. What do you say? Well, they didn't have anybody else to ask except a woman. But the beautiful thing about it is after that wedding ceremony was over, every single one of those pastors came up, shook my hand, or even hugged me and said, now we understand why you were invited to officiate at the wedding. So their hearts were there. It just something had to open them up a little bit. Now that was like maybe, 30 years ago? And look, today it is not unusual to find a woman in the robes of a minister. So at the same time, we've just begun. And I truly, truly think that this new era of woman will progress much more rapidly when women respect who they are and not give their power over to the masculine energy, but to put themselves alongside and work together. So that's what I believe.